Do you not know that when you present yourselves to someone as slaves for obedience, you are slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin resulting in death or of obedience resulting in righteousness? Today we want to ask the question and not do a full-on word study, but do just a look into what did Paul mean when he used the term slavery in this verse. So we want to keep in mind as we're reading this verse, as we're reading the epistle of Romans and some of the New Testament passages, we're going to see the word slave thrown around almost unapologetically. But what does it mean? And so while there was a time, you got to remember, while there was a time that slaves were brought into Roman society by the hundreds of thousands, one must be careful not to assign the barbaric treatment of slaves that we kind of saw in the early history of America. Don't assign, and really the barbaric treatment of slaves by the Romans in the pre-Christian centuries to the early Christian era. And this is because humanitarian changes had been introduced, and these led to radically improved treatments of slaves who had most of the legal rights that were granted to the freeborn. So keep in mind, as we're reading these verses, when you hear the word slave, it's not how the people were treated in the pre-Christian era by Roman society. It's not, how African American slaves were treated in early years of American history. Some slaves received better treatment than free people. Depending on who your master was, you might have been treated better. You might have actually been in a higher class once you earned your freedom. A good master would have meant that slaves or a slave would have been like part of the family. Now remember, they did not share all the same rights as a family member. If you read Galatians 4 verses 1 through 7, which will be down below, you don't share all the same, you don't have all the same rights. What is Galatians 4:7 says, therefore you are no longer a slave but a son, and if a son, then an heir through God. Slaves could be like part of the family, but they weren't heirs in the family. That's why we were slaves under the law. Now we are adopted as sons through Jesus Christ. And this is why Jeffers writes that while Christian slave owners are not told to free their slaves, they are told to transform their relationship with them into brotherhood. Take it from you're my slave to now you're my brother in Christ. They were told that the goal of Christians wasn't to eliminate this system. It was seen as just that's what the world is. The goal was to say, let's transform how we look at it. Sin then is a serious matter, because if we're slaves to it, sin then is a serious matter. Though set free from it, we can in effect become its slaves again if we give ourselves to it. Or we can become slaves of righteousness and receive adoption as sons through Christ.